Namaste and good morning to all of you. Let's start with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhu Bhavaswaha, Tatsavitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat, Asto Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya, Om Sehna Bhavatu, Sehna Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavahi, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahi, Om Shanti 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 Om. So we are doing Kathopanishad in our class, and Kathopanishad has 2 chapters, and we are still on chapter 1 and section 2. So there are two chapters. Each chapter has 3 sections. So we are on section 2 of chapter 1. And a conversation between Nachiketa, who's the young student, 8 years old, and Lord of Death, Yamraj. Yamraj. See, there are 2 terms, Yamraj and Yamdut. Yamraj is the god of death. Yamduts are his servants. Okay. So if you read Purans, you will see that great personalities, when the time comes for them to leave this body, Yamraj himself comes. But ordinary folks like us, he will send Yamduts. Okay. So there's a little difference. So we ended our last week's class with verse number 15, where Yamraj is saying, the goal which all Vedas declare or praise, which all penances proclaim, wishing for which they lead the life of a brahmachari, that goal I will briefly tell you, it is Om. Okay. So he's telling us what the means are. For all different means, the goal is Om. And Om means God. Now let's start the class with verse number 16. Further explanation of this. Etat hi eva aksharam brahm, etat hi eva aksharam param, etat hi eva aksharam gyatva, ya yat ichati tasya tat. Etat, this. He means indeed. Ev means alone. Aksharam, immortal. Brahma, etat, this, he indeed. Ev, verily. Aksharam, immortal. Param, the highest. Again, etat means this, he indeed. Ev, verily. Aksharam, immortal. Gyatva, having known. Ya means who. Yat means which. Ichhati, desires. Tasya, to him. Tat means that is. So this word is verily Brahm alone. This word is also highest. He who knows this word, so he is talking about this word Om. He who knows this word obtains verily whatever he desires. Whatever of the 2, actually. And what are these 2? Sagun and Nirgun. Whatever he desires, he gets. So Lord of Death is explaining the worship of the very symbol Om, God. So on one hand, Om is the supreme goal. That is very significant that it is goal. But it also provides the meditator with a symbol or a form of the supreme reality also. So you meditate on Om, you become one with Om. So he is declaring it that the very formula Om is reality. See, just like in this world, there are symbols, whether it's a flag of a country or a crown on top of a king's head, or a chair of a certain position. Those are the symbols of might, symbols of royalty. So Om is a symbol. It's not just an idol. It definitely represents the absolute reality, but it also represents the relative reality also. So the worshipper or the meditator can meditate upon it as the supreme or as the relative. So that's why we see that Om, a symbol of Om, in the temples, in our homes. And whenever we look at it, it reminds us of God, the absolute reality. So in that relative existence, that symbol, we can see the absolute. But that's only seeing with these eyes. But if we can do the deep and long meditation, we'll see that we can discover a personal identity with that Om also. So this symbol is no different than us. There's a sameness. It's like a realm of his identification, a meditator sees. So it's a lower and higher really means you can see the upper Brahm in it, and you can see the Par Brahm also in it. So you can see the Brahma Lok also, and you can achieve the Brahma Lok also. With the help of the greater purification, deeper power of concentration, through long ponderings over the nature of the self. What do the meditators realize? I am aham asmi. This I am. There's no difference between this Om and me. There's no difference between God and me. But the purification is needed. So not at the relative sense, only at the absolute sense. And that's why he said, obtains verily whatever desires. We all are familiar with, as you think, so you become, that saying. When the thinking becomes so pure, when we have only to wish or desire, our desire does come true. But then somebody might say that, why none of my desires come true? Why? Because the mind, average mind, is tossed by a lot of thoughts. You desire this and you desire that. Constantly it's fluctuating. But if it's concentrated on one, the mind which is crying only for one, there's a power. So that's called a single-pointed mind. A single-pointed mind can wish for anything to the exclusion of any other thoughts though. But in our mind, there's a flow of different thoughts constantly. So that's why a yoga abhyasi goes through this technique of controlling the mind. By controlling the mind, conserving the energy, preserving the energy, and directing that energy towards the right goal. That mind becomes such a dynamite. And that dynamic mind can go towards the chosen goal. That's a one-pointed mind. But we exhaust ourselves with all kinds of thoughts. Mind is constantly fluctuating, constantly worried. So over here, Yamaraj is saying, if a meditator meditates upon Om with a desire to enjoy in this world, he will gain this. But if he meditates upon Om with that kind of a spirit, the absoluteness then becomes one with that also. So this Om worship helps in both ways. Etat alambanam shreshtham, etat alambanam param, etat alambanam gyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. Etat, this, alambanam, support, shreshtham, glorious. Again, etat means this, alambanam, support, param, supreme. Etat alambanam, this is support, gyatva, having known, brahmaloke, in the world of Brahma, the creator. Mahiyate, becomes adored. Most glorious is this support. This is the supreme most support. He who has realized, known, this support comes to be adored. That means worshipped in the world of Brahma, the creator. So, Jnanan ev tu kevalyam. That means by knowledge alone is liberation. This is called a siddhant, a fundamental. So by the subjective experience of the knowledge, absolute alone, we realize the eternal. That's how we reach the peak of the perfection. And that is the end of all successes. But in this verse, this Upanishad is advising for the benefit of less evolved disciples also. Somebody is doing upasana, worship, and a successful worshipper reaches the Brahma Loka. This is also called the state of Hiranyagarbha. It's not considered the highest, but it's higher than this mortal world though. It's almost like a Devloka, Brahma Loka. It's also called a Brahma Rupi Loka or a Brahmani Loka, the world of the glorious creator. So worshipper, through his karma, the actions. So karma can't worship properly, having certain desires, you can reach there, he says, the world of the creator. But a person who meditates upon the significances, which he mentioned earlier, the symbol of Om, knowing and realizing, and through the Gyan, the knowledge, becomes absolute himself. So both the paths are open for us. Do we want to just do the upasana, sadhana, to attain a higher realm, or do we want to meditate in a way where we want to extinguish this identity altogether and become one with Brahma? So in this verse, you can note that Lord of Death has hinted at the goal of both actually. The worship and the Gyan, both. So when he says worship, that's a Karamkand. When you say Gyan, that is the knowledge, absolute knowledge, the Gyan. Okay, but he keeps on telling us that eternal absolute reality is fully symbolized in the word Om. Now, next verse you are all familiar with from Bhagavad Gita. Na chayate mriyate va vipaschit na ayam kutaschit na babhuv kaschit ajanitye shashvata ayam purana na hanyate hanemane sharire. Na jayate, not born. Mriyate, dies. Va means or, vipaschit, the all-knowing, the soul. Na ayam, not this, that means the Atma. Kutaschit, from anything elsewhere. Na means not, babhuv, come into being. Kaschit, anything. Ajaha, unborn. Nitya, eternal. Shashvata, everlasting. Ayam, this. Atma. Puranaha, ancient. Na hanyate, not slain or killed. Hanyamane, being destroyed. Sharire, the body. The intelligent Atma is not born. Nor does he die. He did not spring from anything, and nothing sprang from him. This unborn, eternal, everlasting, ancient is not slain, even when the body is destroyed. If you're going to revisit your Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, over there we see the reproduction of even the very words of this mantra, especially the second line of this mantra. Word by word is over there. So Lord of Death is directly hinting at the divine spark, the Atma, which presides over the matter, the Prakriti. That means the body, mind, and intellect. So Atma presides over it. And Atma is not born, nor does it die. See, all perishable things, anything in the Prakriti, will undergo modifications. And all those modifications are what? When we see in our own body or the bodies in front of us, we see the birth, we see the growth, the disease, decay, and the death. So all those modifications are of the body. We see the trees outside. Few months ago, they were green. Then they turned into different colors. Then they're gone. Then new ones will come. We see it all the time in the Prakriti, and we see it in human beings also. So that which undergoes modifications is a perishable, finite quality. That's what we study in the Upanishads. And there is a term vipaschit in this verse. Vipaschit is used for Atma. That is a root word, is a vip. Vip means inspired, inspiration. So born of the experience of the pure knowledge. So the soul is unborn, only the body is born. It's a false arrogance in us, or ignorant thinking in us, which doesn't see this. We may see it in other things, but we don't like to see it in us. And we just live a life of a confused mortal. But this is the reality. Then continuation of this, he says in number 19, Hantaha chet manyate hantum, hata chet manyate hatam, ubhautau na vijanita, na ayam hanti, na hanyate. Hanta, the slayer. Chet, if. Manyate, thinks. Hantum, that he slays. Hata, the slain. Chet means if, manyate thinks, hatam, killed. Ubhau, the second line. Ubhau means both. Tau means they. No means not. Vijanitaha, know well. Na ayam. This, ayam means this, na means not. Hanti slay, na hanyate, not is slain. If the slayer thinks I slay, and if the slain thinks I am slain, then both of them do not know well. This slays not, nor is this slain. Number 20. Ano aniyan mahata mehiyan atma asya jantoh nihitah guhayam tam akartu pashyati vit shokah dhatu prasadat mehimanam atmanah. Ano, that means the subtlest. Aniyan, subtler. Mahata, then the greatest. Mahiyan, greater. Atma, the soul. Say it's janto, of the living beings. Nihita is seated. Guhayam, in the cavity, heart cavity. Tam means that, akratu, desireless. Pashyati, realizes. Vit shokaha, free from sorrow. Dhatu, of the sense and mind. Dhatu. Prasadat, grace. Mahimanam, majesty. Atmana, of the self. The Atma that is subtler than the subtlest. Greater than the greatest. Is seated in the cavity of heart of each living being. He who is free from willing and wishing, with his mind and senses composed, beholds the majesty of the self and becomes free from sorrow. Again, this is a much quoted verse. First, he is defining the Atma as the smallest of the small. Some people might think that, okay, all right, it's so small, we don't have the instrument to see it yet, but maybe in future we'll have the instrument. So to clarify, he says, it's greater than the greatest also. So it's not yet seen or discovered because of the instrument, but that's not true. So to negate that probable misunderstanding, he is saying greater than the greatest also. And over here, great is meant to cover the entire universe of manifested existence and truth. It not only pervades, envelops, and penetrates through and through this Jagat, but also extends further than the multitude of the universes that whirl around the space, this entire Brahmand. So that big. So truth is described, or the Atma is described as both the tiniest of the tiny and also the biggest of the big. So that really means that Atma is eternal, all-pervading essence, and even the minutest space conceivable is pervaded by this great divine Atma. But who can really experience it? It is so big and it can be so small, but who can do it? Who can really understand it? He says, he who is free from willing and wishing, akratu, that really means desireless. We got to make our mind free of the desires of the external sense objects. These desires do not let us penetrate through. Because with the desires, we keep on dissipating our energy. And we are unfit for this kind of a realization. That's why Lord Krishna also said, the very first enemy is calm. 3 gateways to hell, even said. So it starts with the calm. But if we can conquer this, if we can become desireless, then he says, dhatu prasadat, the purity of the subtle elements in the seeker start to come. Intellect is purified. There is a single-minded, single-pointed mind. And there's a tranquility in the atmosphere. You feel that tranquility in the outer atmosphere also and the inner atmosphere also. And this is the prasadat, that is the grace. And that is that grace, through that grace, we feel blessed. And there is a communion takes place. Communion between us and the God. Okay, so remember this akartu and dhatu prasadat. These are the terms he's using over here. Then again, he is explaining this. See, all of this is in reply to that question which Nachiketa asked about Atma. And this Lord of Death is elaborating on it to him, and we are getting the benefit of it too. Asinaha duram vrajati, shyanaha yati sarvata, katam mad amadam devam, madanya gyatum aharati. Asina, sitting, duram, far, vrajati, travels, shyanaha, lying down, yati, goes, sarvata, everywhere. Ka means who, tam means that, mad, amadam, who rejoices and rejoice not. Mad and amadam. Devam, the God. Madanya, other than the myself. Gyatum, to know. Aharati, is able. Sitting, he travels far. Lying, he goes everywhere. Who else, other than myself, is able to comprehend the God? Who rejoices and rejoices not. So over here, he's trying to describe the indescribable Atma Tattva. Language is finite. That's why phrases like this or sentences like this, they get blasted out in a confusing contrariness. Sitting, he goes beyond. Don't we feel that about the mind also? We could be sitting over here and a mind can go thousands of miles away. With which force that mind is working? The force of the Atma. Sitting goes far. Lying, he can go everywhere, anywhere. And he doesn't have to move. We all know that movement is possible only when a thing is a limited entity. When it is all pervading, it actually cannot go anywhere because it is everywhere. Limited body of mine will have to get up and go to the other room. But this unlimited expanse is everywhere. Where will it go? See, like my right hand cannot move into my right hand because it's already there. It's all pervading in my right hand. But my body is sitting over here. I'll have to stand up and go somewhere. So that's what he's trying to tell us. The same idea is repeated here for the purposes of emphasis and clarification, that lying, he goes everywhere. Then he says, who else, therefore, except me, is able to comprehend the God? I am part of God. I am an ansh of that anshi. If I don't even understand the anshi, who else will? So this Lord of Death, he means to state that one who has gained sufficient control over the mind and the intellect through a sincere discipline of self-control alone, through a higher meditations, will know the nature of this truth. Reach to that culmination. Experience it subjectively, the all-pervading truth. So only we can do it. We have to do it ourselves. It is a subjective experience. Shariram sharireshu anavstheshu avasthitam mahantam vibhum atmanam matva dhira na shochati. Shariram, bodiless. Sharireshu, in the bodies. Anavstheshu, perishable. Avasthitam, seated. Mahantam, supreme, the great. Vibhum, all pervading. Vibhu word is used for God, all pervading. Atmanam, Atma, Matva, having realized. Dhiraha, the wise person. Na shochati, not grieves. The wise person who knows the Atma as bodiless, seated firmly imperishable bodies, great and all-pervading, does not grieve. So that's why it said that grieving is, or sorrow is always the unwise, or even it's called a tamasic nature. Over here, sure, he's talking about that person who is Mahantam, does not grieve. But we got to know this fact, that grieving pushes us down into the tamsikta. In the maturity of our discrimination, when our intellect and mind, they are evolved, just like Nachiketa's, we really come to inquire. We know, we seek, we discover ourself, the Atma. This is definitely a peak of the evolution. Even though Atma is who we are, but we haven't experienced it. Because this realm of perfection, we have not reached yet. We identify ourselves with the finite which keeps on changing, even though we are the infinite. So this idea is explained in this mantra actually. Detach from the false, attach yourself to the truth. That's where lies the true redemption, all the successes and all the achievements. So that's why he says the wise man who knows the Atma as bodiless, seated firmly, imperishable bodies, great and all-pervading, does never grieve. It's a lot of deep message for us in here. Because the reason we are studying all this, not just to study, we want to ultimately experience this. Verse number 23. Na ayam atma pravachanena labhya, na medhyana bahuna shrutena, yam ev esha vrinute ten labhya, tasya esha atma vivrinute tanum swam. No means not I am this atma pravachanena, by the study of the Vedas, labhya, attained, na medhya, not by intelligence. No means not, bahuna much, shruten, by hearing. Yam, whom, ev means alone, eshaha, this atma, vrinute, chooses, ten, by him, labhya is attained, tasya, his, eshaha, this atma, vivrinute, reveals. Tanum swam. Tanum is a true nature. Swam means its own. This Atma cannot be attained by the study of Vedas, nor by intelligence, nor by much hearing. It is gained by him who chooses this. Chooses this. Atma alone. To him, this Atma reveals its true nature. So, in other words, the mere book knowledge is no knowledge at all. Sure, book knowledge is the means, but that's not the goal. And medha word is a retentive capacity. That is a power of intellect. A mere memorizing of the stanzas or even cultivating a capacity to discourse upon the mantras is not enough. Again, they can help, but that is not the goal. So now, this great teacher is telling us neither the study, nor memorizing, nor satsang can give us a subjective experience. Does that mean that the subjective experience is impossible? But we see that in the second line, he's asserting here that realization is possible. Only we have to pursue the methods advocated by the rishis. And we have to have sincerity, faith, consistency also. That's why he says the aspirant who seeks the Atma. If we are seeking the Atma, if that is our goal, we'll pursue it diligently. And Atma will reveal by itself. It is there. Vrinute, the root word is a vri over there. Vri means to choose. Okay. So anybody who chooses, if that is our goal, most of the times, even when we are worshipping, what are we choosing? We are choosing the fruits of this finite world. But if we are choosing only the Atma, just like Nachiketa did, he wanted nothing other than the knowledge of the Atma. In spite of all those temptations which were being offered to him, he said, no, I want to know about the Atma. So the seeking consists of the slow removal of all the negativities in our physical and psychological makeup. So that is part of the seeking. Okay, seeking is, that means all the flaws in our personality, all kinds of prejudices, all kinds of vanities all kinds of preoccupations with the tragedies in our life, all kinds of selfishness, egoism, hatred, jealousies, greeds, lusts, they all keep us away from this land of real nature. So that's what he's telling us. Vrinite world is a very powerful word over there. If you choose only that, you will have this subjective experience. Otherwise, you are just going back and forth. You could be working very hard, but all you're doing is going forward and coming backward, going right and the left, and essentially standing at the same place. But if you choose to move towards one direction, then we have to work on all these negative natures of ours. And we'll see that in the next verse. In detail, Yamaraj is telling us what to do. Na avritaha dushachrat, na ashanta, na asmahitaha, na ashant manasa va api pragyanen enam apnuyat. Na means not avritaha, unrefined. That means who has not turned away. Avrita. Dushcharitat. That means the bad conduct. Charitra is a conduct. And du means a bad, like a wickedness in our personality. No means not ashantaha, not pacified. That means not shant. Na asamahitaha, not no concentration, like a whose mind is not concentrated, has not learned to concentrate. Na means not ashant manasa, whose mind is not tranquil. Va means or, api means also, pragyanen by knowledge. Enam, this, that means the Atma, apnuyat can obtain. Beautiful verse for us seekers to do the sadhana properly. But he who has not turned away from bad conduct, whose senses are not subdued, whose mind is not concentrated, whose mind is not pacified, Shant, serene, can never obtain this Atma by knowledge. So this is a continuation from the previous verse. He is explaining the inner barricades that we in our ignorance have raised between ourselves and our own self. We are the Atma, but we have created a big wall. And this wall is made up of. So we got to work on it. If the self-realization, we choose that. If you are choosing the Atma, we have to work on these. Only then we will enjoy the consequent joy of Godhood. We have denied ourselves of this because of these walls. So very clearly he says, who has not turned away from the acts of adharma? That is a dushcharitat. And we all know what adharma is. Hurting somebody, lying, stealing, being jealous. All that is adharma. We are very familiar with this. So the very first thing he says, who has not turned away from the acts of adharma? Second thing he says, who has not brought his senses under control? So if the senses are not under control, then how can the mind be tranquil? And if the mind is not tranquil, mind cannot concentrate. And who has not found in his mind a peace within itself? Why? Because of the anxieties regarding the fruits of its actions. So in this month, we see the hints by which we can come to intensify our spiritual sadhana. So quickly, first of all, retire from your immoral and unethical activities. And then learn to slowly move towards the art of controlling your sense organs from the habits of reveling madly into the sense objects. Okay, the eyes just automatically just go outside, whether they need to see it or not, or the ears. These sense organs are so powerful. These are the windows. Through these windows, the information goes in. We got to control them. What kind of information is going in? Then after a certain amount of control over the sense organs, the mind grows into the power to concentrate. We learn how to apply our mind to a greater vigor and efficiency. And if we just keep on doing the sadhana, there is a further success. You completely get detached from the mental anxieties for the enjoyment of the fruits of even the tapasya. Not just only the worldly anxieties, even the fruits of your own sadhana, you are totally relaxed about it. That's why it said a fit student is pressed out between the diligent urgency felt and the sincerity of the pursuit put in. So let's stop it here, even though there's only one more verse left, but we'll start from this 24 again next week, because very important for us as seekers to know what we are supposed to do. And are we doing it or not? Are we moving ahead or not? We can grade our own papers. There's nobody else is grading us. We got to know, am I improving or am I standing still or am I slipping back? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Om.